All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Empowered Podcast. If you haven't been here before, my name is Emily Arth. I am a psychotherapist, an educator, and a creator. I'm the owner of Empowered Life LLC, which is a private practice located in Columbia, Missouri, the heartland of the Midwest. And this podcast is a place where I talk about ways to connect your head and your heart to help you lead the most abundant life possible. So I'm super excited to be here today with Tricia Dietrich. This is the first of a series of interviews that I'm going to be doing with an assortment of healers, because one of my strengths as a psychotherapist is that I very much believe in holistic treatment of trauma, which is my specialty. And so in my own life, I integrate a lot of different healing modalities, and I like to share those modalities with my clients because I feel that taking a comprehensive approach to treatment always warrants the best results. So today I'm bringing Tricia to you, and Tricia is a certified Color of Woman teacher and coach. She is an advanced theta healer and a reiki master. She has a master's degree in health sciences from the University of Missouri and former careers in the health professions and wildlife biological research. She has over a decade of experience working in the healing professions. Her quest to heal herself from undiagnosed chronic illness led her to become the person that she is today. Tricia's passion is to go forth and inspire others to create love and beauty for themselves. Her work is based on a lifetime of learning and experience. Her calling is to inspire transformation that helps others feel strong and whole. She does this by using creative techniques involving art, meditation, and writing. Her techniques are non-conventional and revolutionary. She hosts a variety of individual and group events, both in person and online. Those who benefit from her offerings are curious and feel a yearning for something deep inside that they can't quite put their finger on. This yearning calls over and over in a variety of ways. Those who attend her offerings are committing to show up in a deeper way for themselves. They arrive with butterflies in their bellies and are often surprised by the beauty and power of their own creations. And as a participant in some of Tricia's offerings, I can tell you that this is true. They are profoundly transformational. So I can't wait to hear more about Tricia. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me, Emily. It's great to be here.
So where are you coming to us from today? Where are you at?
I am in my brand new studio, and I just unpacked it last week. This is my easel that I teach from. And then this is a painting called Queen of the Cosmos, and she's kind of something that holds dreams, and also she's made of stars. And looking through my paintings in the past, she's always been there. It's interesting because I have not used the same types of paint. I've used things that have been gathered from my life, but patterns show up, and these color patterns are in the very first painting. They actually make up the veil of my very first painting. So that's where I'm at. This is Sacred Source Studios. This is this is the place where I teach from, and also record my online events. So.
Excellent. Well, Tricia's art is beautiful, but the meaning behind the art is what's so profound. And that's why I wanted to bring her on today, because of course my audience is primarily interested in how to overcome difficult life events. So I was wondering if you'd be willing to tell us more about the work you do specifically and how that helps people overcome difficulty in their life.
The work that I do specifically is I have events that are tailored towards groups of people, and some of it's based on my own inner journey, and I create curriculum around what's alive in me at that moment. And then if I'm called to share it, then I share it with others. And it's a combination of writing and working with creativity. Most would say that you're creating art. And the word art scares people. So I'm just going to say that it's with being creative, because everyone's creative. Everyone can do what I have to offer. You don't have to be an artist. And some of the best art that I've ever seen is from people who've never picked up a paintbrush before. Mm-hmm. Because it's not about the art, it's about the process. And so it's by using writing, we work with story. We work with what's alive within you now. And usually, was read, there's something that brings people in to these offerings. I tailor it for specific groups of people, but I work with a wide variety of men, women, and children. My offerings, though, are tailored towards more specific niches. And so then the people that come in are often, there's a relationship even before they know each other when these people come in. And then we work on something together, and it helps them move and transform whatever was kind of bubbling up for them in the moment. And it doesn't always have to be a problem. Sometimes they come in and they just want to have fun, and oftentimes they find information that they would have never found had they not done the process. In doing it also, your access point changes. It's kind of a mystical process, not kind of, it is, where there's a lot of mystery involved, and you're forced to rub up against some of these growing edges that we all have. And by doing that in a safe environment that involves color and intention, people are able to have revelations that they wouldn't have had anywhere else. So
I hear you saying that you kind of intuitively allow yourself to be guided to what type of offering you're doing at any given time. And,
yes,
and
I'll look at it by intuition.
Okay, and then the people who come to those offerings, whether or not they know before they arrive, there tends to be a thread that connects them and why they're there. So an example of that, Tricia not long ago put on an offering where we looked at the death mother archetype, which could have to do with mother wounding. And so the people who showed up to that, myself included, we were working on some wounding around that type of relationship. And we were processing that through art and through Tricia's guidance.
Yes, that was an offering that was based on the myth of Medusa. And that's one of the most misunderstood myths in history. And transforming our own inner Medusas. So it was a lot of fun. It was hard. There are points that were triggering and hard for each of us, but it was fun to paint a monster and then really see what made that monster. And then to be able to transform her into something that was powerful and loving for our lives and protective. She's a sign of protection. I work with archetypal energies, so Medusa is definitely the perfect example of an archetype. When someone says that word, a picture immediately comes to your mind, and that picture is solely based on what you have experienced with that word in your life. That's what archetypes are. So mother is an archetype, father, and I help people paint their own archetypes. And in painting them and walking through a 13-step process, which is called the Color of Woman technique, people transform those archetypes. And doing this with me over a period of time, which Emily has, you can see her work. It's hanging up downtown Columbia right now. The archetypes change. And it's really interesting because they change with you. It's really a reflection of who you truly are. And it also helps you understand what your own journey is and how we each have different symbols and different language for our own unique expression that we were born with. And this process helps you remember who you were. Mm-hmm. Before you forgot.
Yeah, so tying that into more like traditional psychotherapeutic trauma work, right? With trauma, we say that there are parts of ourselves that we're orphaning out, that we're holding away because we're uncomfortable
Yes.
looking at those parts of ourselves. And so the work in psychotherapy of reintegrating ourselves looks often at our narrative, right? What is the story that we're telling ourselves about us? And how is that story hurting us? And then how can we reauthor that story in a way that makes sense so that we can integrate that part of ourselves? So Trish does this same thing primarily using art, but also using writing, using meditation and visioning.
Yes.
And so I think part of what maybe intimidates people, you said that creativity can be intimidating. And for sure, working on our shadow or our hurts or our pains can be intimidating. But what can someone expect when they work with you? Even though this is a creative process, how guided is it versus open? So
It
is
says
there guidance
guided as it needs to be.
Okay, as guided as it needs to be. So am I
Some
going
people require more openness than others.
Okay.
It's as open as it needs to be in order for the person to experience their own transformations without experiencing a lot of trauma, additional trauma. And that's so different for everyone. And that's why it's important to really know who you're calling into your space. I have a specific technique that I do with people for moving trauma, and it's called medicine painting. And I do that, but I usually make sure that people have a support system in play so that if they need psychotherapy, I'm not a psychotherapist, and my work doesn't center around you retelling your story and going through analysis. It has to do with you writing out your story and then claiming from the aspect of an observer, and then stepping into a commitment to want to change and reintegrate that, because once that commitment is made, then it changes your whole life. It puts you in a different trajectory, and you're no longer living. I liken it to I'll go into an analogy. Say that like your body is a house, okay? And in this house you have all these different things going on, and say there's a family that lives in the house. And you got a fire in your belly, right? Well, that's your stove, and the fire in your belly is cooking some delicious soup. And then everyone is eating this soup, and the soup is really everything that you're cooking up in your life is in this soup. So you got some carrots, and you got some celery, and you got the broth, and you got whatever's circulating around, and it's being stirred and circulating around. And by it circulating around, the food gets cooked, and it provides flavor and nutrients for the people in the home who eat it. So there's mother, father, or maybe a child. Well, one day, the lights go out in the house, and that would be trauma. Something happens, and it's a non-linear process. Time changes during this process, and there's massive uncertainty, and a lot of emotions come up. And then the lights come back on, and you try to act like everything's normal, soup's cooking. But what happened in that time was that some of the stuff fell to the bottom, right? And then when the fire goes back on in the stove, well, some stuff gets burned on the bottom. And when you go to stir that soup again, some of that burnt stuff kind of bubbles up. So liking it to after you've been traumatized, you try to go back into your own life. Things bubble up. And then when you eat the soup, it doesn't taste the same. There's a burnt flavor. And so what you do is you just what we do with soup that gets ruined or burned or too salty, we throw it out, right? We throw out that pot. There's really nothing we can do with it. We want to get rid of it. So we do that. But with trauma, what happens is when we're going through life and these things are bubbling up, we can't throw that out. We can't throw it out. So it's kind of like a Groundhog Day experience where you go to bed and then you wake up and there's a bigger pot of soup burnt that's on that stove swirling around. And then you try to throw that out and you go to bed and you wake up and it's bigger. And then it's bigger and then it gets so big that it starts spilling all over the floor and the countertops and it starts ruining things. And what happens, and that's us trying to suppress our trauma, and it just can't, it's just always there. So it's, so we keep trying to throw it away, but we can't because it's a part of us. And so what happens when the soup's overflowing and spilling everywhere? Well, the family tries to control that, right? They try to contain it. And then when they can't, and it keeps getting worse and worse, a lot of times what happens is there's a lot of blame. There's a lot of, well, you're supposed to be responsible for that. And that doesn't, and then there's a lot of scapegoating. Then the person who is probably the most sensitive and the most vulnerable gets a lot of the blame because it's easier, and usually that's your inner child. It can be other parts of you, but usually that's the inner child. And then it gets to a point where it gets bad, and the only way to contain it is to just take that bowl of soup off the stove and give it to your inner child and put that inner child down in the basement. Close the door, because then there's no more soup. You don't have to worry, problem solved, but that doesn't solve it. So then you go on, and that inner child is still growing, and it's yelling. So you try to numb down the voice and however you can. And then people come over and they say, well, what's going on? What is that noise? There's no noise. Nothing's wrong. It's fine. There's no noise at all. What? I didn't hear that. And then maybe years go by, time goes by, and it's a lot of trying to acting like you're being normal when you have something in the basement that's growing that you can't really control, but it's there, and it's going to be there. It's never going away. So I think the commitment is when you decide to take the padlock off that basement door and you let that child back out. And that child is grown and changed, but it's been in the basement. It's also been in the dark. And so there's a reacclimation process, and that's when a lot of people go into analysis, because that is also when they come to see me. That is also a nonlinear process. The healing is similar to the trauma in that it's a nonlinear process that's going to take as long as it takes, Like I liken it to, okay, well then you start cooking soup again. But nothing is the same. The taste of the soup is not going to be like it was before, even though you want it to be, and you have these expectations because you've had that soup before. It's not the same. So it's just a nonlinear process of trial and error. And this is where I'm helpful, because I use writing and I use vision. So literally, like I would take someone through that, and I'd create a container, and then we'd literally make pieces of soup and then see what that soup is for you and see how it's bubbling up and how it changes. And while you're painting soup, you're working through your trauma in a way, and then you have an image. So there's a lot of layering, just like there is working through trauma. There's a lot of layering, and there is a lot of spiraling, and it's hard because we expect life to be linear. Our day, you get up, you go to work, you come home, you eat dinner. This is linear, and it keeps us safe. And healing from trauma is there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's uncomfortable, and a lot of times people don't feel safe, but they do feel safe painting, and they do feel safe writing. So I create a safe place for people to work out their story with that in a nonverbal way, and then writing, so that the writing is part of the left brain, the linear process, writing down that story. And then working with image, putting that story into an image, making a symbol for that story. And then seeing how you want that story to look in your future. So this is how I work with people, and I help people just see what how in their, I do active imagination is what it's called. So we go into different spaces within you, and you see where that story resides in you, and you give it a new role for your life. And by walking through a nonlinear process that takes as long as it's going to take, without controlling that process, but just holding someone as they're going through different steps of transformation, people are able to move the energy through their bodies in a way that is complementary to other forms of therapy.
Beautiful. Yeah. So that's something that I love about Tricia's work, is that as a trauma therapist, I know that there are my own modalities that I'm comfortable and use regularly to help people heal, but that there are infinite numbers of ways that people can access and heal their trauma, and everyone's path is different, which is why our intuition is so important. That I think we have all these choices, but our intuition is what guides us to what choice is best for us. And so anytime we choose to go into our stories of pain, that involves a lot of vulnerability, and it requires us to be courageous. And some people can access that through talking, which is what I do a lot of with people. But like you said, some people want to be primarily nonverbal in their processing. Or they may, like writing is not necessarily have to be nonverbal. You can still share that. But I think that Tricia's process is a lot more kind of like hands off. Like Trish is holding a safe container and she's there for guidance. But it's almost like when you put your hand on the back of someone's, on their lower back, and you're just sort of like guiding them forward. You're not pushing them, you're not pulling them, but you're just like, oh, let's go in this direction now. Or, oh, you're stuck. Well, put your foot there for the next step. That's how I've experienced Tricia's process, which I think is a much more gentle and, like you said, flowing and kind of mysterious approach to healing. That I know that when I've left, like I've felt a lot of questions even about everything that happened, that there's an integration period that happens after you even go through the process, that you start to come into more and more realization consciously. But it's like the creativity process is a lot of subconscious work where magic is happening and you don't even fully realize it while it's happening.
Yeah, you don't, even I don't. Like I said, years later you might know, because something will be created in your waking life that will be an affirmation, or like it's like a puzzle piece that fits together. That is a materialization of the work that you did on the canvas. And I liken the way that I hold people to, if you're painting a picture, and imagine that you're in grade school trying to make something, and the teacher's up there and they're showing you how to draw a picture. There's a lot of difference between them waiting for you to make your own, like say where I'm teaching people how to draw an apple. Well, I have my own way of drawing an apple, but you have yours. And I have to wait for you to figure out what that way is. And if I wait for you to figure out what that way is, you know your own way to draw an apple. If I get impatient and I go over and I grab the pen from you and I say, no, you're doing it wrong. Here, you do it like this. Okay, now do it like this. And then I've missed the whole I've missed the whole point of why I'm even teaching someone how to draw an apple, right? They're just learning my perception of how to draw an apple. So especially with work with trauma, it's so important to find support that will let you find your own way and not push you to follow their way.
Right. Well, and a huge symptom of trauma is avoidance. So that story that you told was great, right? About locking this down into the basement, and because that's all about avoiding. I don't want to look at that. I don't want to look at that. And then what you said about remembering or reclaiming the inner child, I often describe that as we all have this inner child. And when we've gone through trauma, especially during our earlier life, it's like our inner child is back there waiting for us to come and grieve with them, or to come and validate the feelings that they had that no one validated at that time, because maybe those feelings were silenced, or maybe there was too much fear around disclosing it, or it was just too painful. And so that's part of that reclaiming process, is that, we do have to go through that temporary discomfort, right, of opening up the basement and then looking at what's there. But that's not the whole story. That's just one chapter in the story. And that's another beautiful thing about your art, is that, like I say, all of her pieces are really a whole story, and all you're seeing behind her is the cover of a book, right? You typically write the whole story even before you title it sometimes, but for sure the artwork on the book is one of the very last things. And so when you look at Tricia's art and it's beautiful outwardly, know that every single one of these paintings has messy processes underneath them. Like she said,
there are 12 paintings literally underneath all the layers that make up. You're seeing the end result of the transformation. And it's important to go through the process, because you are transforming something within yourself while you're painting that you're not even aware of. You're transforming something that there's a lot of talk about the quantum field right now in physics. And there's a lot of talk about, and a lot of validity now in science, even about art therapy, that's verifying and validating all this woo-woo stuff. And what I do with people is I work with them with paint, in quantum space, to transform the energies that are in all their stuck places. And so I liken, like, if I leave my painting in the middle of that process, well, I haven't gotten to the point where I've taken the lock off of the basement door. And I'm just there, and that's fine. And sometimes sometimes that's where that needs to be. So I let that sit, but I usually finish the process unless there's other things in life that need to happen before. And it's not a finishing of, well, I'm drawn back. Something is pulled in my belly. It's in my gut. It's in all my cells. And that decision, just like the commitment to heal, is something that is much deeper than just, well, we've done this research today and we've decided that it is the best decision to take that lock off and start healing. Okay, well, you can make it from that, and that's a very logical, literal place, linear place where 90% of us live most of our lives. But that decision has a lot of depth to it, other than just that layering of logic. It has to do with your body, your cells, your heart, the energy that you use to get through your day. Everything has to be behind that. And when people come through my door, everything usually is behind that. And they go as deep as they want to. Those are the weekend and more in-depth work is like that. I do have other workshops that are 3 hours long that are introductory, where you can just dip your toe into what I do, and that's more of a lighthearted, and the movement, we go a lot faster. That's it's more to have kind of a tiny revelation and not a big transformation like healing trauma is kind of like an endurance run, right? Mm-hmm. And this would just be like 10 meters of that endurance run, going to a 3-hour workshop, if that. Or I work individually with people, and that's a deep dive endurance triathlon. So.
Well, and something you said too about stopping or pausing in the process, and how you said, you know, I don't just leave it there, but I will kind of marinate in that spot that I'm in and then go forward. I think that's a really important point for us to make, and that I share with my clients all the time, is why it's so important to do deep trauma work with someone else. I say that it's like if I was walking in the woods and there was a deep, dark cave that I'd never been in before, I probably would not want to go in there by myself. And it may not be wise for me to go in there by myself. But if somebody said, hey, let's go in this cave. I've been in there before. I know how to navigate it. I've got a torch. I'm going to get us in and get us out safely.
And I have keys.
Right. Much more likely to do that with that person. And that is what healing trauma is like, that when you're guided into your own inner cave, it can be scary. And if you try to do that work by yourself, the likelihood that you'll stall or stop and not go all the way and bring out the treasures of the experience, it's very high. And that's why you need to have a good guide to take you in and get you out safely. It's also part of your sort of accountability around your process.
I think so too. I think it's very necessary because, well, going back to the soup analogy, when you you can try to clean up that mess yourself, but isn't it so much easier if you hire someone to come in and show you how to clean it so that that smell doesn't linger in your house and you're not. So and also I think that it's really vitally important that once the decision to heal or transform that trauma is made, that you have someone that can keep you in the observer's role of your story. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's really easy to go spiraling back in, especially with trauma that is just runs very deep. Mm-hmm. It's really difficult, in my opinion, to go into that deep trauma without some kind of guidance and assistance and come out transformed. You can do it, but it's a much more difficult path. And I think even while you're doing it on your own, having other people around you just to support you, to make sure that you're eating and drinking and sleeping and showering during the times when you feel stagnant is important. But I'm just, for me, my role is there to keep people in the role of observer and not falling back into their stories. And when they do, stopping and just making sure that we take time to kind of reground and get back into reality. Because that's just over traumatizing yourself. Why do that?
Right. Yeah. And why do it alone when you have all of these incredible helpers out there who are ready and willing to help you and make the healing a bonding experience as well as just a personally transformative experience?
Yeah.
Well, Tricia, this has been wonderful today, having you come and talk to us about your process.
Thank you so much, Emily. Oh, I just love you.
I'm so excited for you and your new studio. I can't wait to see what offerings you come out with. I share Tricia's offerings on my listserv. So if you're interested, please sign up, check out my website, and you can get on my listserv. I'm also going to drop Tricia's information and links to her website and her offerings underneath this video, so you're going to be able to find those easily. And I look forward to seeing you all back here in the future so we can talk to lots of other healers about ways that we can complement our recovery process. Thank you so much.
And if you go to my YouTube channel, I will have a process that you can go through that's about taking on the role of the observer.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you, Trish, and thank you everyone for joining us. Have a beautiful day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.